LA Ignite. I've got with me Chad White today, and welcome, Chad. And we're going to be talking about we're going to be talking about generative AI and what keeps Chad awake at night
Thanks for having me,
from
Tim.
a Gen AI perspective. So, Chad, where can people find you?
You can find me at emailmarketingrules.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Chad S. White. Lots of Chad Whites out there. You want the S in there.
I guess that the S there was the differentiation there.
Absolutely.
So Chad, you wrote an article recently for MarketingProfs, which kind of led me to you, which was this article about generative AI, and you came up with 11 things that keep you awake at night. And you do say in the article these are not, you're not saying that these are going to happen.
Right.
You're just saying that these are concerns, and you're just trying to create a discussion about them.
Yeah. So
So,
definitely not predictions, but
predictions,
things
that was
that
the
are,
word.
yeah, but definitely things that, I'm concerned about. And I
Hmm.
think other people are very concerned about.
Because you went to a particular conference, didn't you? And a lot of the inspiration for this article came out of that.
Yeah, I was at MarketingProfs B2B forum, and there were several sessions, unsurprisingly, explicitly about generative AI. But there were also lots of other sessions that weren't about it, where generative AI was, finding its way into the programming. So there was a lot of conversation and a lot of I talked to people after sessions, and people were definitely having reactions to things that were talked about, both good and bad.
So, off the top of your head, before we get into it, where do you see Gen AI sitting? Um, because we talked just before we went live, saying that Gen AI, in a way, is that the copywriter that you don't need anymore. And I said the keywords for this on YouTube, I'm going to create by ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, the uses I think are it's so greenfield right now, right? I think it's hard to put bounds on it. But there's certainly, yeah, lots of like smaller tasks that I think are only additive, where no one is harmed. There's only upside. But I think going forward, you can easily see how generative AI would, render some jobs, obsolete, jobs that people had before. Certainly, one of my bigger concerns is that the way that and maybe there's like some contradictory data out there we were chatting about that. My sense initially was that generative AI was going to be a really big problem for more senior people. Younger folks, less experienced folks, to be able to use generative AI to kind of get like a big leap ahead. And based on all the conversations I've been having, it seems like the exact opposite is happening. That senior people are using generative AI to replace junior copywriters or other junior people. And so it's a little bit different from what we typically see, where younger people are way more in tune with technology, way more embracing of it. And I think this time it might be a little bit of the opposite. So it'll be really curious to see how that pans out. But one of my concerns there is that all of these kind of like grunt jobs that generative AI is going to replace. Those are the jobs that senior people used to have before they became senior, right? There was those critical sort of stepping stones to getting that experience that you need. And with that gone, I worry about what that means for younger people in general, but certainly for companies in terms of having that that talent flow up the ladder, right? You always need more junior people on your team because 5 years from now you need more senior people on your team. So I could see it potentially really disrupting some types of ladders within corporations where they have that talent flow and that talent development that's going to be really really kind of broken potentially going forward.
Because that brings us on to your first non-prediction, which is that companies won't stop outsourcing the burnout or low-value work.
Yeah, and my concern there is that I tend to see people writing about burnout work very self-referentially, right? They talk about like the work that I don't want to do anymore, generative AI can help me. I think that's great. Um, there's lots of opportunity for that, but I think we're kind of ignoring the fact that a lot of corporations are going to determine what is burnout work, what's the grunt work that we don't want people doing anymore. I feel like right now it's all the leaders that are, really like, blazing a trail, and they're deciding for themselves what kind of work they're not excited to do anymore. But over time, it's corporations that are absolutely going to decide
Yeah,
what you're doing and what you're not doing. So it's disempowering when you view it from that point of view.
yeah, yeah. Yes, yeah. I would agree, and I think that yes, some people will decide what is low value work, and some people won't, because there will ultimately have to be restrictions in terms of what you use AI for, or guardrails,
Absolutely.
because of the data. We don't want our corporate data put into a chat GPT model, because someone can then reverse engineer it.
Right. And I think that's one area that's going to be really fascinating to watch, because right now a lot of the discussion has been around, like public models like ChatGPT. But over time, here at Oracle, we're building, infrastructure that allows people to have their own models that reside,
Well, I was going to say, from an Oracle
started.
perspective, if we take Oracle, there are other brands are available, and what ultimately will happen is that there will be enterprise AI, which will sit within a data center, whether that's in the cloud or whatever, and you will then be ultimately in control of that.
Right. So, like Samsung, they've gotten in trouble. Some of their engineers putting code into ChatGPT. Not too far in the future, that's not going to be an issue, because Samsung will have their own
Hmm.
code writing models that they'll use internally. And it's not hard to see. The New York Times, the Home Depot, like a bunch of big brands having their own bespoke models, that are all on their own servers and protected, and highly trained on the information that they most want to leverage. And once they have that, they're going to want to make sure that they're fully utilizing that. So that, again, that's where a lot of that sort of top down, this is how we do things here. This is how, these are the things we do, and these are the things we let the AI do.
The second one intrigued me, which is companies won't invest in the saved time.
Yeah. So I think there'll be kind of a mix. Perhaps, where you talked about, like, generating keywords and things like that. That's time that you will absolutely save and be able to reinvest. But I saw, I think it was just yesterday, I saw an article about how generative AI might help lead the way to a 4-day work week, and there was a lot of like people reacting to that, like, oh, really? Like, that's very naive to think that that's how it's going to work. And I was trying to think, if there's any other examples of something like that happening, and I was thinking kind of way back to like assembly lines, and I was like, oh, did assembly lines help get us the 5-day work week? And then I was like, no, actually, it was unions that allowed that to happen. So I don't know that like the technology is going to really, allow us to work less. I think it'll allow us to reapportion our time. But I think when companies can save headcount, they will save headcount.
So this the number three intrigued me, which is companies will create digital doppelgangers.
Yeah. So I mean, this is already sort of happening already. Like this blurring of the lines between, like, you know the workers that you have and then sort of non-workers. We're seeing the rise of digital influencers already, entirely made up people. Sometimes they're transparent about how that they're made up and not real, and sometimes they're not. So you see, like, digital, fashion models and digital lifestyle models that have very huge followings on Instagram and elsewhere. um, and I saw another article the other day, talking about how, like, they hope that, like, like fashion models don't get replaced with generative AI, and it seems kind of unavoidable that that's going to happen to some degree. Um, so yeah, but I do think that, it definitely, like right now a lot of influencers are like really pretty excited about generative AI, but I do feel that generative AI is going to come for some of those people's jobs too, as companies, create their own, influencer, their own voice, their own like unique people that in some cases will be trained on like they're formerly like most influential people that used to work at their companies. And there'll be all kinds of copyright issues, perhaps, there that will take years and years to work out, and it won't matter when they do eventually get worked out. It just takes so long.
Yeah, I was just reading an article that got sent to me about unions and the use of AI and how they were starting to use AI and to have a discussion with the employers about AI and stuff, and especially the European regulations on AI that came out last week.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to see what happened with the screenwriters and with the actors. Um, Obviously, they were super concerned, and I think very rightfully so. Um, I mean, we've already seen like in like the Star Wars films how they took past actors and used used technology to reinvent them even though they had passed away. Um, is think about all the like the most popular actors today and think that in 50 years those exact same actors could be starring in films you know in their prime through generative AI. Like,
Well, there's in London we have the ABBA concert that goes on every night, which is based on avatars. It's not an AI thing, but it's avatars, and Kiss have just done something that similar. So, which leads us on to art and craft will be reduced to ideas.
yeah, this one I think I think is probably for me personally like sort of the most alarming. Um, it's it's the general construct is that a lot of people have great ideas, but they don't have the artistic talent to like bring them to fruition, right? The ability to write a song or create a piece of artwork, and in for those people, generative AI can be incredibly empowering, right? Like suddenly you have tools that can bring your ideas to life. I think the other side of that coin is people who've used a lifetime of honing their skills, honing their talent, getting just really amazing at painting or at graphic design or at writing songs or playing an instrument or whatever it might be. Generative AI is incredibly disempowering for those people. It's like totally stealing all of their power, and frankly can like really change like their whole identity when we take some of these things sort of off the table. Um, I don't know. I think it opens up tons of questions about what is art, who are artists, um, and really uncomfortable questions. I think.
Yeah, I know. Someone said to me that AI is now the paintbrush.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. I'm skeptical of those constructs, and I think one of the things that we're already seeing a lot of problems with is transparency,
Yeah.
right? Sports Illustrated, I think it was, just got in trouble for having a lot of articles that were written by generative AI that they were not transparent about, and so they got caught and they got a bit of a black eye on that. Um, I mean, there's huge issues around transparency, and I think especially here in the United States, where generative AI created works are not copyrighted. I think that disincentivizes companies to be transparent about it because then they feel like, oh, this work that like is under their banner can now get stolen and used, without attribution because it's not protected by copyright. So I think we've created this incentive to not be transparent about it, and so companies are hiding it. And that I think brings sort of everything into question when you see things like, is that real? Is that a real painting? Is that, did a person make that or is it made by a machine? And then I think it's fascinating in this age when, Gen Z is all about authenticity. I think authenticity was, what is it, the word of the year from the year?
It was for someone, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, super, super important. Everybody knows that authenticity is incredibly important. And here we have this technology that is getting, that is huge already in its nascency, is, I think, striking at the heart of authenticity.
So content creators will become content editors.
Yeah. One of the big problems with generative AI is that it hallucinates. It doesn't always get things right. It makes up stuff. I think we've already seen a lot of articles and a lot of cases where really weird things have come out of these models. Obviously, over time, I think hallucinations will fall, especially as you get more bespoke models where they're more highly trained. I think they'll have less room to kind of go off the reservation. But I think you know as someone who spends most of my day writing, um, it is somewhat alarming to think about how a lot of people who have primarily been writing will be editing instead. And I said in my article that that's not a knock on editors. I used to be an editor for many years, and editing is really rewarding, but it's not writing. It's different, right? Like, the editors of books don't have their name on the cover of the book, right? The author does, the writer does. So there can be, that's another one where I think, some identity issues, might happen. Like people who've always thought of themselves as writers will be doing a lot more editing, and that's just like, you know, that's a big identity shift.
Yeah, I know someone who's writing a book and they're using ChatGPT, and they're using ChatGPT to give them some inspiration, and then they go in and change it, but they then may put it back into ChatGPT. So there may be a backwards and forwards. They're not taking an output from ChatGPT because they're actually writing it, but they're using it as the inspiration.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case where you're going to have, where's the line,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, I just use generative AI to clean things up and to like change the tone and to make suggestions, versus, we already know like some entire books are largely being written by generative AI. My wife and I had a very spirited conversation about this very issue recently. She's written some books. I've written several books, and I'm
You have.
working. Yeah, and I'm working on my first novel, and my wife was asking me, like, or rather, I was telling her I had no plans to use generative AI, you know, in my book at all in any capacity, because I wanted to feel like when it was done that I did it. And even if it wasn't as good as it could be, even if generative AI could have made it better, I wasn't interested because I wanted to know that, like, the book was a product of me entirely. And she felt very differently. Like, why not use it to make it better?
Yeah.
Like, why would you not want that? So I think we'll have like some, we'll have like people on sort of different sides of the same fence, like not being interested in it because they want to feel like they're taking full credit, which I really understand.
So Stanley has made the comment: is the lack of transparency due to the fact that the written programs are trained on fictional data sets, and no one wants the public to know the basic fact that all programs only as good as the weakest link, which is fictional at best?
Yeah. So I mean, there's been a lot of questions about data sets. Obviously, a lot of lawsuits already starting up around data sets. Um, I do think that that's an issue that will become less of a concern going forward. Again, as you get more of these sort of bespoke models, where that they're more highly trained. But right now, um, I mean, like we know that ChatGPT is trained on a lot of Reddit information and Wikipedia information, and I feel pretty good about Wikipedia information personally. But Reddit information, less so, right? Like it's trained on a
Reddit's
lot
a
of.
bit of the Wild West, really, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And then you wonder why it hallucinates. Well, it's because you know Reddit is has a lot of experts, but then it has a lot of other people who are not quite so expert in their thing. So, when you think about drawing from like the full internet, of course you're going to get information that's not great. I mean, I think we've all seen the internet. It is full of misinformation, outdated information, you know, stuff that's not good, to put it mildly. No, but I think that those kinds of issues over time will get more ironed out again as these models become more constrained and more focused for particular brands and
So, so,
topics.
so finally, in the last minute or so, number 8 is Gen AI will cause repository to break down. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So today, when you get an email, um, you at least like look at it a little bit because somebody took the time to send it to you. And I think one of the concerns is that as we see generative AI being used more for cold email outreach and those kinds of things, people will feel less inclined, because even if they see that here's an email that seems to actually know me and understand me, like today we get, I get tons of cold email that people have no idea what I do. They don't understand what I do, and those are very easy to recognize as like, all right, they didn't put any effort, so I'm not going to give them, the effort of a reply. But generative AI is going to allow companies to send cold email that will make a decent attempt to reflect that they did a little bit of research. But knowing that generative AI is out there, allowing them to do that, and that they're not actually spending the time, that's where I think some reciprocity might be breaking down, which is really key with so many interactions that we have. Is that you want to see people like putting in the work, you know, and therefore you reciprocate.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the also the when you go to social media, for example, if someone writes a post and it inspires you, you basically say that's a really great post, Chad. Really enjoyed it. Da 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 da. And then the person may respond, "Oh, thank you for that." But, and there's this, and then we get this situation where people say, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate sales." Okay, well, if you're going to automate sales, then marketing, will sorry, the buyers will therefore be automated, and then the repository will basically fall over, and social media basically doesn't have a place.
It'll be something to watch. I think, again, authenticity, right? Word of the year. I think it's so critical. I mean, one of the things that was said at the B2B forum is that, people like dealing with people, right?
Yes,
They don't
it's true.
trust brands, they trust people.
Yep.
And again, generative AI really, has is in a position to really kind of strike at the heart of that value exchange, or that, that human to human connection, you know.
Chad, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. If people haven't read it, then there's go to MarketingProfs and search for Chad S. White, and you should be able to find his article. There's loads of other. He's actually written quite a few articles because he's a bit of an email marketing whiz. And you've written a book about it as well, Chad.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Check out Email Marketing Rules if you're into email
Email
marketing.
marketing rules. Yeah. So where can people find you, Chad?
Yeah, it's easy to find me at emailmarketingrules.com, and from there you'll find all my socials and everything else.
Excellent. And thank you so much for coming on. And thank you, Stanley, for your comment.